The last thing I remember is the silence. Not the soothing silence of the night, but an artificial silence. The sudden absence of the regular hiss from the machine that was keeping me alive. Then, the shock of returning. The pain, the chaos, the panicked voice of the nurse. I floated in a coma for 3 days. 3 days of total absence that paradoxically gave me the coldest lucidity of my life. When I opened my eyes in room 302, the first image I perceived was not the clinical white of the ceiling, but Clara's face. My daughter. She was crying. I knew immediately her tears were not those of relief, but those of terror. She was crying because she believed I was dead, and she was crying even harder because I was alive. My daughter unplugged my life support machine to inherit faster. I couldn't speak. My neck, my throat, my whole body screamed in pain, but no syllable would pass my lips. This vocal impotence forced me to be nothing more than an observer, the silent judge. She took my hand, and that's when the miracle, or the curse, revealed itself. I slowly pointed to the bedside table. She handed me my phone. The screen lit up. When I woke up in the hospital, she was in tears. Her phone had received all my recordings from the night. My late wife Isabel had installed this application. It monitored my heart, my oxygen, and in the event of a critical alert, it copied the audio files to the family devices to watch over me. The red alert, the stopped hiss, the silence. Everything had been recorded, and the audio file, flagged as critical, had been transferred to Clara's device. She hadn't just attempted murder. She had stolen a promise made to her mother. Technology had made her not only the culprit, but also the involuntary possessor of the evidence of her crime. Her face collapsed when she saw the file name in the transfer history. It wasn't the failed murder that condemned her, but the cold traceability of a system designed by her mother to protect me. The crime is in the files. The judge is at the bedside. I spent an indefinite amount of time watching her. Her silence was as revealing as my inability to speak. She was trapped by the perfection of her failed crime. She had anticipated death and a swift inheritance. She got her father's life, but as a prisoner and executioner. I couldn't shout, and that was my greatest strength. Desperation forced her to speak first. "It's not what you think, Dad." She attempted an explanation, the twisted plea I hadn't been waiting for. She brought up Mom, Isabel, claiming her act was a gesture of love, a liberation from my suffering. A bold lie, transforming greed into compassion. She was trying to rewrite the recording we both knew existed. I grabbed the notepad and pen the nurse had left. The movement cost me a superhuman effort. Every muscle in my arm protested. I had to make her witness my weakness, but also my determination. My first sentence was a blade of ice. Love does not inherit. She recoiled. She understood I couldn't be manipulated by pity. She moved on to the real pain. "The inheritance is Mom's money. You promised me you'd release it." She tried to make me the culprit of a failure. She needed justification for her act. I wrote the sentence, the final punch that shattered the mask. "You stole the promise made to your mother." Her tears became real. Tears of guilt before Isabel's ghost. I put down the pen. I raised my finger and pointed to the phone screen. Then I pointed to the bedside table drawer where the charger was. My message was clear. Your service starts now. You keep me alive. You keep the evidence charged. And you stay silent. My first written order concerned the symbol of the betrayal, the key, the small key from the pendant Isabel always wore. It opened a small wooden box, a gift from our honeymoon, hidden in her office. Clara returned with the box. Her face was ashen. She placed the box on the bed. I motioned for her to open it. Inside the box, there were no family jewels or financial documents. Only two things: an old photo of Isabel, young Clara, and me, smiling, and a small, handwritten address book dating back to our early years of marriage. She looked at the address book. I pointed at it. "Is this what you wanted? An old notebook?" she asked, visibly confused. I wrote, "Your work begins." I needed to establish total dependency, to make her time a ransom. I didn't want the money right away. I wanted to humiliate her through absurd servitude, to force her to remember that her freedom was my good pleasure. I pointed to an address in the notebook. Isabel's Old Pastry Shop. Find the best pastry shop in town. Buy the smallest chocolate pastry. Taste it in front of me. Describe it in detail. She returned, breathless. She held a small box. She tasted it. "It's bitter, Dad. A little too much. But the mousse is light. There's a hint of orange." I took the notepad. I wrote a single question. "Is it worth the promise?" She looked at the pastry. She looked at Isabel's box. She wept. "I can't do this, Dad. I can't live like this." I smiled, a horrible smile that only contracted the painful muscles in my face. "You will. Or I upload the file." She complied. I had turned Clara into an operator, my slave, forced to relive her mother's promise and pay her debt in servitude and humiliation. I ordered her to transfer 90% of her own savings account to mine, not because I needed it, but so she would feel money as a loss, a flowing blood, not an arrival. She had to pay to stay alive. My son Julian arrived on the 5th day. He was abroad for his work. He knew nothing. His arrival was my next leverage. "I'm sorry, Dad," he said, genuinely moved. "I should have been here." "Clara took care of everything," I managed to whisper, the sound hoarse and barely audible. Clara tensed. She understood Julienne was not an ally, but a pawn. I wrote on the notepad, making it visible to Clara, but not to Julienne. "I need you. You will. Tell Julian you felt guilty for not being attentive enough. Tell him you need to make amends by arranging a trip. For the family." She pleaded with her eyes. She didn't want to spend more time with me. She didn't want Julian in this dynamic. I pointed to my phone. She relented. She spoke the words, her voice trembling. "To Mom's house on the coast, as soon as Dad is discharged." My internal smile was complete. The hospital was a prison. The house on the coast would be my courtroom. My discharge was a silent triumph. Clara drove me in her own car, and every mile was proof of my domination. She drove impeccably, her body tense like a violin string. She never looked at the highway. She always looked in the rearview mirror, fearing she'd see me take out my phone. I forced myself to appear weaker than I was. I wanted her to feel responsible for my survival, but also to feel the risk that my sudden death might release the file. The silence in the car was my most powerful environment. We didn't exchange a word about the incident. It was the rule of silence I had established. The crime does not exist as a subject, only as a threat. The house on the coast, Isabel's house, the salty air, the sound of the waves. This is where we had raised our children. This is where I had shared my life, my love, and this is where Isabel had wanted me to live my last days, without her, but safe. It was the perfect place for justice, where the promise had been strongest. Julian was already there preparing the house. He was the innocent element, the light needed to reveal Clara's shadow. Julian treated me with simple affection, without the crushing guilt that Clara carried. I started immediately. My first order, Clara will cook my meal, exactly her mother's recipe for pesto pasta. Isabel's recipe was complex, requiring fresh herbs to be ground with a mortar and pestle, a long and demanding process. Clara, the financial analyst, hated domestic tasks, but she did it. She spent 3 hours in the kitchen, her trembling hands crushing basil leaves, tears silently running into the pesto. Meanwhile, I dictated simple tasks to Julian, in writing. Fix the shed lock. Buy wine. I showed Julian Clara's culinary skill, while giving him responsibilities that reinforced his role as external support, not the domestic slave. The next day, the real work began with Julienne. I asked Clara to help me organize Isabel's office. "I need to find that old notebook she used," I whispered. Clara knew the notebook was in my box, but she had to play along. She pretended to search for it while I watched her. I waited for Julienne to enter the room. "Julienne, my boy, can you help your sister? She looks exhausted. She was incredible at the hospital." Julienne approached full of goodwill. I wrote on the notepad, making it visible to Clara, but not to Julienne. "Show him the box. It's time." Clara trembled, but she obeyed. She opened Isabel's wooden box in front of Julienne. He saw the photo, then the small notebook. "Dad, this is the notebook where Mom used to jot down all her thoughts." Julienne was touched. I wrote for Julienne. "Open it, son. Find the date of my last birthday." She left me a note. Julienne searched. He found the page. He read aloud, "Matthew, if you read this, know that I feel at peace. I know Clara will take care of you. She has that innate sense of responsibility. She is my heir, not only of the money, but of solicitude." That was the note. But there was a sentence right after it that Julienne read inadvertently. "I just worry about the ambition that consumes her." Clara's smile froze. Julienne saw his sister tense up. Then he apologized. "Oh, sorry, Clara. I shouldn't have read that." I looked at Clara. I had just shattered the image Isabel had of her by using the one witness she couldn't harm, Julienne. Clara hated me for my cruelty, but she couldn't say a word. Vengeance is pressure that intensifies. My grand finale couldn't be simple blackmail. It had to be total humiliation, the end of any claim to innocence. I waited for the evening of the 9th day. Julienne was out, leaving Clara and me alone. I forced her to sit next to my bed. I took my phone. I navigated to the monitoring application. "I want to listen to the file," I whispered, forcing the words out. "But I want to listen to it on your phone." She understood the horror. She had to be a witness to her own crime, not on my device, but on hers, the very instrument that condemned her. She had to confirm the recording. "No, Dad, please." I just raised my hand and pointed to the application icon on her phone. She took her phone, her hands shaking. She opened the file, Nightlog Critical 1010.mp4, the faint hiss of the breathing machine, then the sharp click of the switch, the silence. And then, instead of panic, the most terrifying sound for her, the alert notification, a subtle beep, followed by the digital sound of the data transfer. She listened to the sound of her phone receiving the file at the very moment she thought she had killed me. She was the auditor of her own self-incrimination. She stopped the recording. She was broken. "What's in that notebook?" she whispered, her voice hollow. I smiled, a real smile of triumph. I took the notebook, turned the pages to the last one, which wasn't a journal, but a bank appendix. I wrote the final words on my notepad. "Isabel never intended to leave you the money directly." The appendix explained. The inheritance, the core of her fortune, was not intended for Clara or Julian. It was meant for a foundation, established for sleep apnea research. Clara inherited only the annual interest if she fulfilled the conditions of guardianship for her father. The conditions were simple: ensure his well-being until his last breath. The murder attempt was not just a crime, it was a total financial failure. She had lost everything by trying to accelerate a process that was already hers, conditional on my survival. She would only inherit if she kept me alive. She collapsed onto the floor. She was the slave of a broken promise and the heiress of a foundation that watched her, symbolically, care for the beneficiary of her own attempted murder. I remained in bed, looking at the white ceiling. I survived. And I made my daughter a ghost, the shadow of herself, forced to serve me in silence. The crime is in the files. The judge is at the bedside. I was going to force her to live with the shame until the inheritance became a curse.